So we are dealing now, we have reached the point where we are going to discuss death and impermanence, and this is definitely something that Buddha Shakyamuni has taught about, where he says there is no means to escape death in any of the four directions. There's no means to escape death in the sky. There's no means to escape death in the depths of the ocean. There is no means to escape death in the top of the mountains. Therefore, always practice pure Dharma. So he's talking about there is no means to escape death, and he's giving different locations. So initially it says in the four directions. There are many types of sentient beings who live in the 10 directions, and in the four or the 8 directions. Then he says there is no means to escape death in the sky. So now he's referring to the birds. There's no means to escape death in the ocean. So he's referring to all the fish and all the aquatic species. And finally, there is no means to escape death, even for humans who live up in the mountains. When the time of death comes, there is no way to avoid it. Therefore, he says it's important that we practice pure Dharma. So usually we talk about entering different things through a door. And we say that the door to entering Buddhism is refuge. The door to entering the Mahayana is bodhicitta. The door to entering Dharma is impermanence, reflecting impermanence. The door to entering Tantra is taking an initiation. So it is very important as the Buddha has taught about impermanence. So what is in the biggest context? What are we saying? We're saying that we have met with a spiritual guide, and having met the spiritual guide, it is important that we practice according to his or her advice. Of course, there are many instructions and many advice that our teachers give us, but here the main instruction is do not waste your precious human rebirth. Make sure that you extract the essence. And Lam Tsongkhapa has made this very clearly by saying we extract the essence by practicing pure Dharma. So why is it that we should practice Dharma? The reason for that is because we all wish to have happiness and we all wish to avoid suffering. But if you want to experience happiness here, and we're not talking about some fleeting temporary happiness, we're talking about permanent happiness that comes with the state of liberation, the state of omniscience. So if you want to experience this permanent happiness, it is very important that you establish the causes of this happiness. So if we want to establish the causes for happiness, the only thing that can help us do that is the practice of Dharma. Only Dharma can establish happiness. So there are 4 points here to consider. First of all, is that we need to practice Dharma because we want to have happiness. The second one is we are capable of practicing Dharma. We are capable of practicing Dharma because we have everything, every favorable condition right now. First of all, in terms of external condition, we have met with a spiritual teacher. Actually, not just one teacher, but many teachers. And we had the opportunity to go to receive many teachings, listen, reflect, meditate. So plenty of opportunity to do this. And from our side, we have obtained the precious human rebirth. We have the complete set of freedoms and endowments. So everything is there, which means we have the great potential. We are capable of practicing Dharma. Now, the third principle is that we should practice Dharma in this life. There are many people who think, in this life right now, I'm very busy. I have a family, I have a job, I have to go to the office, I have to work. And I will practice perhaps Dharma in my next life. But the thing is, we have to practice it in this life because in this very life, we have the precious human rebirth. We must have worked very hard in our previous lives to establish the causes to come in this life with the precious human rebirth. But there is no guarantee that in our next life, we will have again a precious human rebirth because precious human rebirth is very rare. It's very difficult to find. Therefore, we should practice in this life. And the fourth principle is we should practice not just in this life, but we should practice right now, begin practicing right now. There is a great explanation of this point, this urgency of practicing right now in the Lam Rim, within the small scope. The practice is shared with the individual of the small scope. And the reason why we say we should start practicing right now is because there is no certainty in terms of the time of death. None of us can give any guarantees and say, I am certain I have 5 years ahead of me. I'm certain I have 10 years ahead of me. We cannot be certain we have, an hour ahead of us or a few minutes ahead of us. So because of this uncertainty, we're not sure exactly when we're going to die. Therefore, for this reason, we should start practicing Dharma, pure Dharma, right now. So as you can see with this presentation, logically, we come to this subject of death and impermanence. So the Buddha definitely talked about impermanence and impermanent entities. He talked about permanence and he talked about impermanence. Here, when we talk about death and impermanence, we are talking about a gross level of impermanence, because impermanence can be understood in different levels, grosser and subtle. So we have gross presentation of impermanence that refers to death, like when an individual dies. And we have subtle understanding of impermanence that refers to the momentary destruction or deterioration of any conditioned entity. For all functional phenomena, we have 3 phases. We have production, we have abundance, and then we have destruction. So this is something that we can see applying to many, many things, such as, for example, the earth, the stones, the flowers, and so forth. For a flower, the flower is produced, it stays for a while, and then, it dies off, and so forth. However, when we talk about death, so death, not just which is specific understanding of impermanence, this is not something that applies to inanimate objects. It only applies to sentient beings. So if we look into our case, we are sentient beings and we have established this body. It means we were born, we will remain alive for a while, and then at the end, we will reach the state of death. So this is a very profound it's reality, and it's a very profound teaching from that Buddha Shakyamuni has given. So when we talk about death and impermanence, it applies to the 6 types of migrating beings and also to the bardo beings. So when we talk about the 6 types of migrating beings and the bardo beings, we are saying that no matter what is your type, definitely you are born in one of the 4 ways of birth. The first one is to be born from a womb. So all of us humans, we are born from the womb of a mother. The second one is miraculous birth. So miraculous birth is a birth that we find in some of the higher realms. This is how you're born there. Then we have birth from the heat that applies to insects. And finally, we have birth from an egg. So, for example, like the chicken, right? The chicken comes from an egg. In Abhidharma, these 4 types of birth are presented, and the last one is considered to be from the egg is considered to be a lower type of rebirth. From the 4 types of birth, it's considered to be lower because you must have like the hen, and then the hen produces the egg, and then from the egg you get the chicken. So we talk about death, and there are different ways that death might occur. Here we're going to mention 3 types of death. First of all, we can have death due to lifespan. Actually, when we say due to lifespan, it means due to exhaustion of lifespan. The second one is death due to exhaustion of merit. And the third one is untimely death. So in the first one, we talk about lifespan. So lifespan is something that, of this life, is something that is established due to the karma that you established in the past, in your previous lives. So you come into this life with a certain duration, a certain lifespan, okay? So when this lifespan naturally comes to the end, you will die. The second one is death due to merit. And what that means is, although you might have remaining lifespan, you haven't exhausted the length of your lifespan. If your merit declines, you could die earlier. The third one is premature death or untimely death. And untimely death is something that happens due to external conditions. So you still have lifespan, you still have merit, however, due to external conditions, such as, for example, war that we see these days. So when weapons are employed, a lot of people's life comes to great danger. A lot of people die. Not everyone has exhausted their lifespan. Not everyone has exhausted their merit. But due to these conditions of crossfire and war and live ammunition and so forth, people die. Another reason for untimely death is accidents. So people have a car accident, people, fall from a cliff, things like that. So there are cases like this where just that you die, although your lifespan or your merit has not been exhausted yet. So it happens every day. Millions and billions of people die for any of these three reasons. Okay, so we are at the very top of page 12, where it says to take the essence of your human life, there are three actual practices to be accomplished, namely the practices of the three capacities outlined above. So the reason for that is because we have, this is actually very profound instruction. We have said that it is very important to engage in the practices that are shared with the individual of the small scope and shared with the individual of the middle scope as preliminaries for the practices of the great scope. When we talk about the practices of the great scope, we do not say shared, because these are unique practices. However, the practices of the small scope, of the individual of the small scope, are shared. They're shared because it is very important, first of all, to guarantee that you establish another human rebirth in your next life to continue your practice. So all of us need to do this practice that is shared with the small scope, even to get to the point of practicing the practices that are shared with the middle scope. And then, of course, we need to do also the middle scope as a shared practice, before we engage the practices of the great scope. So continuing from this, it says, you have attained the precious human rebirth, human form, difficult to gain and extremely meaningful, and are now a human being. However, this life will not last forever, and it is definitely that you will eventually die. And moreover, you do not know how long death will wait before striking. So here we start with a presentation of death. If you look at the Lam Rim has this presentation that goes through the three roots, the 9 reasons, and the 3 conclusions. So the 3 roots are the 3 main points. The first one is that death is certain. The second one is that the actual time of death is uncertain. And the third one is that at the time of death, only Dharma will be of benefit. So we have already touched on this about how the time is uncertain. Okay, so it is certain that we will die, and we need to perform this meditation on death. However, I guess I was saying there's no need to be afraid of this meditation on death. There is quite a lot of superstition in the West that we do not discuss death, or we don't want to meditate on death, but there is no reason for that. In the Lam Rim, there is a good explanation that says, according to how hard or how honestly you have practiced, the best practitioners are the ones who are happy when the time of death comes. They have nothing to fear because they remember death during the whole life, and that motivates them to practice very hard. So when the time of death comes, they welcome it. They're quite happy. Then let's say the middle level practitioners, they are not at the top, they're a bit lower than that. When the death comes, they have no fear. And then at the very least, we should say that you have practiced in the way that when death comes, you should have no regrets. So as we say, there are 3 roots, 3 important points. The first one is that death is inevitable. So when we consider how death is inevitable, we have to understand that we come into this life due to the karma and the prayers that we did in our previous lives. So how long is our lifespan, how long we will remain in this life, is something that is determined by those things. None of us actually has the power to determine how long we live, or that we will live forever, and so forth. Even people who are very powerful, even people who are very educated, highly achieved scientists, and so forth, they cannot defeat death. They cannot achieve a deathless state. And even if that was achieved, it will be a big problem in our society, right? So, for example, imagine if no one died, right? You just had new people being born. There will be problems with overpopulation. There will be no way to control the population of humans, and that will bring a number of problems. So, as we say, it is determined through the karma and the prayers we did in our previous lives. Let's say we created the karma to live for 100 years, okay? But it is inevitable. So even if an accident doesn't happen, even if we don't have a premature death and so forth, it is inevitable that we will come to the end of our life. So as we say, it is inevitable that we will die. And then, of course, there is the question about all these different pujas that we do to prolong the life, or there are special practices for establishing life, prolonging life, and so forth. The truth is that it is very difficult for us ordinary beings, for any of those practices to prolong our life. Okay, if you talk about bodhisattvas who have high attainments are at a different level. So bodhisattvas with high attainments, they actually gain knowledge of how to prolong their lives, and they can live for hundreds and hundreds of years. That is a special case. For us ordinary individuals, unless there is still lifespan remaining in our life. So let's say you have some difficulty, you have some medical problem, right? But you still have life force and lifespan remaining. Then in this case, of course, all those pujas for prolonging the life can make, can benefit. And also accumulation, purification, and so forth can benefit. But if you don't have remainder of your lifespan, if you have exhausted your lifespan, these type of pujas and practices will not prolong your life. They cannot prolong your life. Mm-hmm. So definitely there are different long life practices, or you can receive a long life initiation and so forth. However, do not think that those things will make your life longer in this life, okay? If that was the case, then that will go against the principle of the law of cause and effect. Having said this, it doesn't mean that these pujas or these long life initiations are without benefit. We're not saying this. Definitely they are of great benefit. Once you're still alive in this life, if you engage in these practices, you create merit for your next life. So in your next life, you will have a long and healthy life. You'll be able to work for the benefit of others for a long time and so forth. So these things are meaningful, but you have to understand, not with respect to this life, with respect to the next life. So it's very important to remember death. And there are great benefits of remembering death. And also there are many important shortcomings and faults if you do not remember death. The main attitude that we have is that we think that we don't have the time to practice Dharma. We don't think we have the time to practice Dharma. And this actually comes from not having contemplated death. So this idea that we are permanent, this thought that I will live, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to die anytime soon. It is grasping at our own permanence. It is not something that comes as a philosophical view. It's not something that is acquired through study and so forth. It is like an innate thought that we have. We have innate grasping for permanence. So we think, I will not die. But the thing is that once we think I will not die, at the same time, we allow our mind to be totally distracted by the 5 types of desirable objects. So constantly, we're looking at forms and we say, oh, this is beautiful. We generate attachment. Or we look at food and we generate attachment for the taste. We look at clothes. We generate great attachment. You know, must have the latest fashion, this color, this shape, this, that, and the other. And this is how we spend our time, our entire life in society. You know, the world goes round because of our attachment for those desirable objects. So it is very important to remember death. So the way that we remember death is that I will die, and after death, there are only two options. Either there will be a good rebirth or there will be a bad rebirth. So in that sense, you remember death, and that makes you engage in the practice of Dharma. So if we look at the essence of refined gold, it says, it is definite you will eventually die. And then the next point after that, moreover, you do not know how long death will wait before striking. So this is the second contemplation, that the actual time of death is uncertain. And then it says, therefore, immediately exert effort to take life's essence. So here we're contemplating the second point, the uncertainty of the exact time of death. So you know that we have 4 continents, and we live in the southern continent, which is Jambudvipa. The lifespan in Jambudvipa is not certain, is not fixed. In the northern continent, the lifespan is fixed, but here where we live, the lifespan is not fixed. And especially now that we live in degenerative times. So if you go back in time, the lifespan of humans used to be much longer, like 10,000 of years. Then gradually it reduced to 1,000 years. Then it came down to, you know, a few hundred of years. Then it came down to 100 years. Now we are about 80 years long. However, the actual lifespan is not certain. So here, when we contemplate the uncertainty of the time of death, we also have to contemplate that there are many factors that contribute to our death and very few factors that support or contribute to our life. So when we were initially born from the womb of our mother, well, that was one condition that, you know, brought life. But now, as we go through our life, we see that there are many factors that can bring our death. So some people die due to the elements. Some people die due to decline of merit. Some people die because of war. Some people die because, you know, sentient beings harm other sentient beings and so forth. So very important to consider that there are very few conditions that support my life, and there are many conditions that actually go against my life. Therefore, it is important that I start practicing Dharma, and that is pure Dharma, as soon as possible. So as we say, there are many conditions that contribute to our death. There can be external conditions or there can be internal conditions. For external conditions, we have already mentioned the elements, the wars, and so forth. Also, the food can be a condition that contributes to our death if it is unsuitable for our constitution. We also have internal conditions that can lead to our death, such as, for example, our afflictions. So once our mind becomes disturbed, you can see we have cases of people who self-harm, who commit suicide, and so forth. And there are also different types of gods or different types of demigods that harm humans, and they can become conditions that bring about death. So we continue. It says, you have had infinite previous lives in higher, lower, and intermediate realms, but the Lord of Death, like a thief in a rich marketplace, has stolen them all indiscriminately. How fortunate that he has let you live this long. Generate a mind so filled with the awareness of death that you sit like a man hunted by an intent assassin. So this is how we do not know the exact time of death. And then with the next paragraph, it begins with the third principle, which is at the time of death, the only thing that can be of benefit is Dharma. So it says, at the time of death, money, possessions, friends, and servants will not be able to follow you. However, the traces of negative karma created by their sake will pursue you like a shadow. That is how you must go from life. Think it over. At this moment, you are content to eat, drink, and consume. Yet life, wealth, sensual objects, and food just burn on, and you accomplish nothing of value. Fully direct whatever remains of your life to genuine Dharma practice. Do this from today onward, not from tomorrow, for death might strike tonight. So we see here there is mention of living the life, the good life, consuming, enjoying, eating, drinking, and so forth. But when it comes at the time of death, you will see that having spent your life like this, you have not actually accomplished anything substantial. So there comes the time of death. And even people who are very well off, very rich people, when they reach at the time of death, this is the final moment of realizing that they cannot take anything with them. We even have to leave behind this body that we have. This body is like from the time of our birth, we have cherished this body. And in particular, Geshe was saying 21st century, already in the 20th century, people are obsessed with the body. People spend a lot of money on maintaining, sustaining the body, making the body look good, and so on and so forth. It doesn't matter how much money you have spent on this body. At the time of death, even that cherished body is something that you have to leave behind. And even your close friends and your close relatives, people that have been next to you your entire life, even you have to leave these people behind. And even your teachers, your gurus, that you always want to meet, you always want to be with them. When the time of your death comes, you have to even leave those behind. So, as the saying says, this body is like the guest house, and we only stay for a very short time, and we have to vacate. We have no option. We have to leave. So, just as if you don't pay, let's say, the fees, if you cannot pay whatever is the amount for the room for the day, the owner of the guest house will kick you out. So it's like this: you cannot stay forever in the guest house. So the other thing to consider is that when it comes to death, there is no specific order according to the age. Usually we do have this preconception that the old people should die first and the young people should live longer. They should follow. But this is not always the order. Death does not follow this order. Very often we see young people dying before those who are much older than them. It might be that often people have this motivation. They say, oh, I plan to live for a very long time in this life. I bought a house. I bought all those things. I'm going to live and enjoy them. However, we have no say in that. The duration of our life is determined from the karma that we establish in our previous life. So unless you have established the causes for long duration or whatever in your past lives, you do not have the certainty that you can enjoy those things, this long life in this life. And therefore, we see it's very important that we practice pure Dharma, and we practice it with urgency. So it's very interesting to look at this situation of the body. Now, we, especially for humans, and there are a lot of human beings who consider themselves to be very important. And indeed, there are some humans who have a lot of power, so you can consider a great minister or someone, in a very high position who has a lot of power. And once that person is alive, they can do a lot of things. They have the power to do a lot of things. But once the time of their death comes, suddenly there is that fear, because now they are going to the unknown, and they realize that all of a sudden they have no power, they have no control over the situation. If we talk about animals, in the case of animals, when an animal dies, there is a lot of use. You can take the skin, you can take the bones, you can take the meat, you can take the intestines, various parts. With animals, we can use a lot of parts of that dead body after death. But with humans, it's a different case. We do not use any of the parts of the body. And once death sets in, suddenly that body, all the elements of the body decline. So there is a very bad smell, very unpleasant smell, and everyone is in a hurry to get rid of that body. So this is very interesting because in general, when you have heat is considered to be a condition that promotes birth, right? If you have heat and moisture, you can have things growing. But in the case of the human body, after death, when there is any heat that is generated, this is actually an indication of the opposite. This is the indication that the body has started rotting. And this is where the smells comes from. So it's a very interesting thing about the body. Once we're alive, this is that's a precious human rebirth. You can achieve anything you want with this body. It is the type of body that can lead you to Buddhahood. But the moment you die, this body just decays and smells. So there's a story of this person who did not want to think about death, had no recollection of death. However, he had befriended a ghost. And he used to ask the ghost, this question, when will I die? The ghost, as a reply, would say, oh, today this and this person died. The next day, the ghost will come and say, oh, today that and that other person died. So the ghost was talking about other people who had died and was trying to urge the human friend who was still alive to remember death and impermanence and engage in the practice of Dharma. However, that individual was just paying no attention because the answer was always what the ghost would say was like such and such person over there died. So he just thought he dismissed it. And then just one day, the ghost came and he said, tomorrow is your turn. Tomorrow you are going to die. And this came as an absolute shock because that person was totally unprepared, had not thought about death, had not practiced any Dharma. And then all of a sudden he was told that, okay, your life has come to an end. So the thing is that with every step we take, with every activity we undertake, we should just remember death. So you wake up in the morning and you wash your face, you should remember death, as in, I'm getting closer to death. You walk and you have a little pain in your knees. This should be a reminder of death. I'm getting closer to death. Whatever activity you do, with every step you take, you're just getting closer and closer to death. So you can see great practitioners who practice Dharma in Tibet. Sometimes tantric practitioners, they would use instruments made out of human bones, or they would wear ornaments made out of human bones. They would meditate on cemeteries and so forth. And all of these were means that they would employ in order to remember death. Okay, so after the three roots, the 9 reasons, the 3 conclusions of death, the presentation of the Lam Rim is meditate on the aspect of death. So if we go according to the tantric presentation, we go through a series of dissolutions that will bring about the state, the 4 empties, which is the empty, the very empty, the great empty, the all empty clear light. And as we go through this series of dissolutions, we will have the dissolution of the elements: earth dissolving into water, water dissolving into fire, fire dissolving into wind, and wind dissolving into consciousness. And with every stage of dissolution, there will be also internal and external signs. So, for example, when the earth dissolves into water, this is when the body becomes very heavy and you're not able to move your limbs anymore. When the water element dissolves into fire, this is the time where you don't sweat anymore and you become dehydrated. The tongue becomes very dry. You don't have any saliva in your mouth and so forth. Then we have the fire dissolving into wind, where the heat of your body disappears. And then wind dissolving into consciousness. This has to do with the breath. This is when when you stop breathing. So since we talk about stop breathing, we need to mention here that the actual duration of death is very short. It happens from one breath to the next, right? So you breathe out one breath, and then you're not able to breathe in again. So death happens just in that interval. So when you stop breathing, there are different cases. There are, of course, the case of individuals who enter Thupten, and Geshe was mentioning this case in the Lam where in the Dratsang, sorry, where someone stayed in Thupten for 17, 18 days. It was a well-documented case, and many scientists from Emory came to take measurements and so forth. And it was obvious that consciousness was still within the body. For us ordinary beings, some extraordinary practitioners enter the Thupten and can stay there for a long time. For us ordinary beings, it is usually the consciousness remains within the old body, the aggregates, for 3 days. And therefore, it is not advisable that you move the body or you dispose the body, you burn the body before the 3 days have passed. We know that there are many organisms who inhabit our body. So if you burn the body immediately, as soon as the breath, or very quickly after the breath ceases, actually this is great negativity, because you are stopping the life, you're killing all these organisms. Yeah. So in this process, we have earth dissolving into water, water dissolving into fire, and then fire dissolving into wind. And when fire dissolves into wind, this is when the heat of the body dissipates. So the other thing is the Lam Rim mentioned is that we need to meditate on the aspect of death. We have mention of this in Master Shantideva's Bodhisattva's Ways of Life, where there is a verse that describes how one goes into cemeteries and observes the bodies of other people. So this is a type of death meditation that we can do. So when you go into a cemetery and you observe the corpse of another person, you have to reflect that not long ago, that was the cherished body of someone. That person was alive and they cherished that body. And just a few hours later, this is just a corpse. And then reflect that this will also be the case with my body. So this is something that we have to continue to keep doing. It's a form of analytical meditation, thinking about our death, how it will come and what will happen to the body and so forth. So the conclusion of all this, the reason for this meditation, is to reach the firm understanding that it is very important to practice Dharma, pure Dharma, with urgency. Okay, there's a question. So, okay, there's no questions. We will just summarize what we have been talking about. We are very fortunate that we have obtained a precious human rebirth, and right now we are healthy and we have all the favorable conditions. This is the time to practice. As Lama Tsongkhapa has summarized in the Lam Rim, in all the other great texts that refer to this, we can perform this meditation on death, reflecting the 3 roots. So the first root, or the 3 important points, right? The first one is that death is certain. Death is certain. It means that it is 100% certain. There is no ambiguity. There is no chance. There is no possibility of escaping death. You cannot say there are, like, let's say 90% possibility I die and 10% I will not die. There's no such a thing. Second, we often think, I'm still young. I will do Dharma practice later. However, the actual time of death is uncertain. There's no guarantee that you will not die tomorrow. You will not die after just a few days. Therefore, it is important that you practice Dharma and you practice it quickly. And finally, at the time of death, the only thing that can be of benefit is the Dharma, is the imprints you have placed in your mind. Your wealth, your family, your friends, your country, even this cherished body that has been together with you from the very beginning of this life, all of those things you will have to leave behind, and they can be of no help to you. At the time of death, the only thing that is important is imprints. So we have imprints of virtue and imprints of non-virtue. If the majority of imprints, or what we activate at the time of death, is imprints of non-virtue, this will lead us into a rebirth in the lower migrations. And that will be very unfortunate because these types of rebirth are characterized with a lot of suffering. Therefore, what we're aiming for is to reach the time of death with many imprints of virtue. So this is why we say it is important that we practice Dharma.